All right, we've got a lot to talk about in this video because I'm going to be talking about my modification for the Axalara build here that leaves all of the functions intact. In fact, it's mostly a relatively simple change from the original version of the Axalara, but it does also include my own custom version of the Leewa character for riding on it. We'll take a look at that towards the end of the video if that's something you do enjoy. Be sure to subscribe, it helps out the channel tremendously, and also leave a like because algorithm stuff. The other question I had for you too in the comments below is if you like this version of the Axelara and you think I should give this treatment to something like the Rocco. I personally think that the Jettrax ages really well, but this vehicle and the Rocco look a little less polished, especially as time goes on, and with the introduction of new parts, it's very easy to address that. So let's start from the back end, noting that we introduced some actual color to those thrusters. They're not hollow anymore. I use trans blue here. I think I would like trans orange better, but unfortunately I only have one of these shields in that color. So the trans blue will have to do, and it still looks good. Nothing wrong with it at all. Moving on from there, we have the Tahoe Stars armor piece, 3 of them. So all the tri-wing gets that as well. And we also get these red discs directly in front of that. Let's move forward on the vehicle where we've got these small thrusters on here, sort of like micro adjustment thrusters atop the jetpacks that we already had on the original model. But now the jetpacks are capped off by the Toa Nuva shoulder pad piece there as well. We've got the Matau sword piece here in red, which you could also introduce here in silver if you don't own the red, or you could leave the larger wings there, but I liked the smaller wings. They kind of fit here perfectly, so I opted to use those instead. But on top of that, we also have the Bittle shield pieces, which moved from the front of this vehicle and replaced the new Paru claws, which also moved because they just look a lot better back here. And really, honestly, if that's the only change you make, it is such a good one. But it does require changing the build of the tri-wing very slightly. That tri-wing has a specific lift arm on here. It's a little bit hard to see like this, but it is an angled lift arm that's like 4x6 or something like that, and it gets in the way of those shields on the front end, so you just have to swap it for the slightly longer version of that lift arm and then make the adjustment on the opposite side of the wing. Throw the whole tri-wing back in there and it works perfectly so that these are not under stress, right? They just connect and they work really well. This is also where I attached the parts that the legs attach to, the feet attached to for Leewa, so that ends up working out pretty perfectly. Moving up from there, we have the Tahoe Stars foot piece here as a bit of a seat, which I actually think looks really nice here as well. It just graduates this slope really nicely, so I quite enjoy that. The Bittle shield is still here as well, but now directly underneath it we have some Toa Metru feet pieces. I used silver here because, well, we have them, right? And it ends up making it look a little bit like an engine block almost underneath there, which I like. I do own these feet in Mata Red from a bootleg set. However, I do like the silver better here, I think. And obviously not everybody has access to them in red, so I wanted to make sure that that was definitely something doable for everybody. The Matoro axe piece here, literally just connected on a single pin and then an axle threaded through the model to connect to the opposite axe on the opposite side of the vehicle, and it really just helps to shape up this area here further. Covers a lot of stuff there. I will say if you got big hands that this might bother your hands a little bit just because you can easily run your fingers into them, so you know, address that as you do. But let's go ahead and move on from there. We've got these armor pieces on the actual handlebars, and now the handlebars are affixed a little bit lower in the vehicle. They don't rotate on their own either. And on top of that, they're affixed further in so that they don't come off easily with the character's hands, which I really appreciate because the original version, they just could easily come off with Leewa when you removed him, and that just never looked good. It was an extra step you had to take, so fixing that was just I guess a small priority. In terms of functions, once again, as mentioned before, all of them still work. We'll see the other functions as we get closer to the front of the vehicle, but of course the landing gear still works as you would expect, and in this case here, we actually have this little wing that can be moved out of the way to make it easier to grab onto that knob. But of course that wing's not the only thing introduced in this area, because we have the Proto Steel Talon piece, and we also have this claw here as well. We'll talk about the claw in a minute. I'm not a huge fan of this weapon, but I do like it here on this vehicle for a couple of reasons. It ends up shaping up the vehicle nicely, especially the side profile, because these wings kind of stick out a little bit, which looks really neat. But also on top of that, they still allow for this to open. And of course, let's utilize that space because in the original it's hollow. But here now it is holding 8 Zamor here, so that you have a full reload for your blasters directly in front of that. Getting those Zamor out can be a little bit tricky if you have bigger fingers, of course. You can stick your finger in from the opposite side and push them, but that's not always effective for someone like me, so I also included an axle that can easily slide out, so you can push those in from the opposite side. Is it elegant? No, but it is a solution. I actually worked on introducing a function in there, but I just was not super happy with how the function was coming out, so I opted to just do this much simpler change here that doesn't require a lot of parts forming, if you will. Moving back from there, though, again, we have those new particle claws, which once again follow the silhouette of this curve really nicely, and we also have some Mantax claws to further follow that silhouette, so it looks really nice from the front end as well. But we also have more of the Tahu Stars armor, 6 in total. I know that that's a lot, not everybody owns that many by any means, but I think that it's a good filler for here because we have to make sure that whatever piece we put on top here to cap this gap is still able to allow this to open, and in this case it does. Moving forward, we have the crosshairs here, nothing fancy. I think that's pretty self-explanatory, but it can move so it can sort of accommodate either blaster, also just because it's easier to leave it moving than try to affix it in place, though that's definitely possible. And then we have the other Matau blades. If you only own 2 of these blades in red, by the way, I think this is the better place to put them because it fills out that gap a little more nicely, while again still allowing for this to open up. This is of course that other knob function, which still works as you would expect, except now we also have a little tiny thruster engine type thing inside here, just something to fill out that space a little more, look a little more attractive, and that way, you know, if you want to be somebody that poses your character with it, maybe he's working on it or whatever, right? Have fun with it. I really think that it's worth that. So the function still works as you would expect, but you'll now note that because those shields are gone, these Technic panels are attached directly to these panels back here, which means they move, but they're not the only thing that does, because these Tahu blade pieces are also attached to those panels directly, meaning they also move as well, which actually makes it look really aggressive on the front end now. I quite like that because they don't just have those shields sticking in place doing nothing, right? It also ends up pointing to the crest like little angry eyebrows, which just looks really cool. And of course, let's mention that crest here in silver. Directly behind it is the shin guard from the Axalara set, just one of those in this build here. And then I just changed the color of those crown gears from gray to black since I have them in black. And I think that might be every change that I made. There were a couple little structural changes that I made with like certain lift arms in the build, but nothing terribly fancy, so I'm not going to go over too much more of that here. So yeah, that is the build that I've come up with for the Axelara. Is it messy? I could definitely see the argument that it's still kind of noisy, kind of messy, but I think I'm pretty happy with the balance overall here. There are still a couple things that I want to address though, like notably this here can angle a little bit just because there's too much play in certain parts in the back. That was also true for the original build, and I'll continue refining that as we go along. And there are a couple little things that I may change as well. In fact, I may still even change this whole assembly here so that you can add a function in there to tip the ammo out, but then it doesn't tip when the door is closed. I'll have to figure out a way to do that. I definitely can do it, but it's all about if I think it's worth doing, because I'm also not trying to introduce like 1,000 parts to this set. Let's go ahead, lay this down now, and talk about Leewa. So this version of Leewa that I designed, of course, is based on my posable Leewa or / Mystica body revamp build. So it's still very similar to that. However, it's now a bit shorter for a couple of reasons. First off, I wanted this to feel like a more natural evolution of Leewa Nuva, hence the color blocking specifically here, right? But also, he's actually not that much taller than Leewa Nuva, which I've got sitting on a shelf over there, so I'm not going to be showing it here. But when I actually measured him, Leewa Nuva is about, I think, like 3/8 of an inch taller than Leewa Mata, and this is about 4/8 of an inch taller than Leewa Nuva. So this in total is 7 and like 5/8 inches tall. Really respectable. Definitely nowhere close to the size of like a Toa Inika build. Definitely not close to the size of Leewa Fantoka in either of his forms, right? And of course, once again, that color blocking just really goes a long way to work with this character. He's got some hands here in this case that I think fit, you know, his build because it's Leewa, right? And then, of course, the only custom pieces I'm using here are the armor piece, which is designed by Galva, modeled by them as well. And it's one I printed off as a test print way a long time ago when I first got my 3D printer. But in front of that, we have my mask here, which was modeled by Rothanak, but it's based on my design here. And I really adore this mask in and of itself. I'm pretty happy with how it came off. This is actually the first time I painted it. I've had it printed for a long time, but I went ahead and color matched the Mata green on here and threw it on the character. And I'm so happy I did. It looks really good. Maybe the only thing I would change to the model, because it does run into the armor here ever so slightly, and someone actually talked about this the other day too when I posted something about it on Discord on a different server. about like adjusting the cheek size a little bit. And I think I might actually touch that up a little bit just so that it raises them a little bit so that there's a little more posability in the head, because it can obviously still like look around just fine. It does have the axe pieces on the shoulders, which do limit that some, but it does a good job, right? But also to allow it to maybe be able to look down a little bit further. Also, I could just adjust the neck height as well, which I think would still look totally fine on Leewa specifically, but it's not something I want to do for every character. In terms of the build too, there is also some waist articulation. That is just on a friction pin, but the armor here on the front is connected to a rubber lift arm, which actually means it centers itself. So it's kind of an interesting build in that by turning it, the armor here is actually pulling it back to center to the best of its ability, right? So you can still pose the character with its torso slightly bent, slightly askew, but it's going to attempt itself to sort of correct for that, right? Which I think is a pretty cool thought. On top of that, you know, just the regular shoulder pad pieces on here as well from the Rocco set specifically. And overall, there's not a whole lot else, I think, to really talk about with the build. Most of the build is, once again, very similar to the version of Leewa that I built in the past. Couple changes structurally, internally, but not as many as it probably looks like, just due to the fact that I was color blocking a lot closer to the Toamate here. So really happy with this design. Hopefully you guys enjoy it as well. In terms of the weapon I'm having him carry, I'm just using my Matau G2 Turaga staff, because it's just already a really good build. Why change it? And I don't currently have an axe build that I've made specifically for Leewa that's an updated version of an axe that I'm happy with, right? I've never really went out of my way to try to build something for Leewa specifically, just because his axe is such a iconic part of his character, at least in 2001, and I've seen plenty of axe designs out there that I really like, but I'm not trying to take somebody else's design. This character is my character. It is the design that I want to come up with sort of from the ground up, right? And since this is my design as well, I figure it's still a really good use on this character. Plus, he's never carried a cow staff himself before, so it's a new thing for him to carry too. Obviously, the leaves on here are a cool aesthetic because he's a jungle but air character. All that stuff. Love all of it. Anyway, that's it for this one. Hopefully you did enjoy the video. Once again, be sure to subscribe. Helps out the channel. And I will see you all in the next one. Before I go, once again, just wanted to say, let me know your thoughts on the vehicle. If you think it's too messy, if you think it's too clean, if you would change something on it yourself, because that's part of the fun here, right? Is each of us have our own idea of what we think could be better on each of these vehicles. And the other thing I wanted to mention too, like I said, once again, is if I were to change anything about this, but not go this hard, those shield pieces, man. I really think that with the addition of just those shields here, maybe the Motoro axe, but really these shields, it goes so much better for this vehicle, and it just makes it feel a lot more finished. You could do the Technic panels in the back, in the front if you want. You could leave shields in the front as well and use 5 shields on the vehicle total. You could do something else entirely in the front, whatever, totally up to you. But on the back end specifically, I really think that those shields hold this machine together a lot better. Anyway, that's it. I will see you on the next one. Take care.